Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, my dear respected any viewers, we begin our lesson tonight by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue with our lesson in the commentary of the Aqaid al-Nasafiyyah by two great Imams, that is al-Imam al-Nasafiyyah and al-Imam al-Taftazani. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the understanding and bless us with iman and taqwa, and protect us from all difficulties, trials, tribulations, viruses in dunya and akhirah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with husnul khatima, ameen, ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah, we will take a look at where we stopped in our last lesson. So basically, in our previous lessons, we are speaking about the impossibilities to be described to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically, last week we spoke about the impossibility of Allah taking up space and place. And likewise, Al-Imam Nasafi mentioned here, وَلَا يَجْرِي عَلَيْهِ الزَّمَانِ. Allah is not binded by any by time. So He is not binded any by place, and He is not binded any by time. And then he goes on, Imam Taftazani goes on to speak about the reason why Allah cannot be binded any by time. So he mentioned time is a creation, and in every moment time is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus it is impossible that Allah be binded any by His own creation. And then he mentioned something in general, all the impossibilities in general, where he speaks about the impossibilities that Allah to be described with all attributes of contingencies, where the mujassimah and the mushabbiha they differ. The mushabbiha are those who ascribe body to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mushabbiha those who ascribe resemblance to contingent beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all these are impossibilities. So he mentioned waraddan ala al-mushabbiha. Maybe we just read a bit, although I've covered this last lesson. So he mentioned here why al-Imam al-Nasafi repeats certain things, so that it becomes clear to the readers and to the students the importance of understanding in all these aspects, that it is impossible to associate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all these contingencies. So he mentioned raddan ala al-mushabbihati wal mujassimati. This is in rebuttal against the mushabbiha and the mujassimah. Wasa'iri fiqh dalali wa tughyan, and all other sects that are astray and away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bi ablaghi wajhin wa akadihi, in the best of ways, and he say falam yubali bi takriq al-alfadh al-mutaradifa. So al-Imam al-Nasafi, as what is mentioned by Imam Taftazani here, that he doesn't mind to use words that are synonyms, that are repetitions, to explain the meaning in a much better emphasis. طيب. Then he mentioned about that the impossibility of Allah being jawhar arat, as what is mentioned by the scholars of the Maturidiyah, where he mentioned this jawhar ma yatarakkabu anhu ghayruhu wa ma'na al-jism ma yatarakkabu huwa an ghayrihi. All these things we have mentioned last time. Allah, we say Allah laysa bi jawhar wala jism. Allah is not a jawhar, is not an atom, is not made up of atoms, and Allah is not a substance. Allah is not a body. So all these things basically he repeats it again. Bidalili qawlihi ma hada ajsamu min dhak wa anna al-wajiba law tarakkab. And Allah is not compounded, and he said if Allah were to be compounded, then the parts also will be pre-eternal. Then that is impossible. So Allah is not compounded by parts. If it's compounded by parts, those parts will be pre-eternal, and they will be also necessary in existence, and that is impossible. Right, so all these are basically further explanations on the impossibilities of Allah taking up space, as what he mentioned. Wal ashkal, this figures, we cannot be saying that Allah has a particular figure. Wal kayfiyat, Allah is like this. wal maqadir, and in terms of volume and size. All these things yani will bring about contradictories. Naam. So I think what you call it, these are things yani that we have any understood. And then he mentioned all these things and he will bring any to the point anywhere we say that Allah is in need of a mukhassis. When we say that Allah yani Allah is a body, or Allah is made of an atom, so Allah yani is in a place, what does yani the conclusion yani will come when we say Allah yani na'udzubillah min zalik, and he has a shape or figure or a certain yani amount and so on and so forth. All these things yani he mentioned that yaftakiru ila mukhassis, yani it will bring any about that he is in need of a creator, because any it is evident that he is any from contingencies. Wa yadkhulu tahta qudratil ghayb fayakunu hadithan, then he is contingent, any hadith. Naam. So this is any the extent any that when we ascribe contingencies any to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will come any to the stage anywhere we will say that Allah yani is contingent, and that is any impossible. Now any we go on any to the next part. The next part, Al-Imam Taftazani and he speaks any about al-mukhalif. Who is any the mukhalif here? If you read the translation, and he said those who disagree with this position, yani meaning those any who claim that Allah is a body, those yani who claim that Allah take up space. So he is speaking any about the mujassimah and the mushabbiha. The mujassimah and the mushabbiha. So after yani he speaks any about the impossibilities any of Allah being ascribed any to contingencies, and that the fact that when you ascribe contingencies any to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will bring any about that Allah yani is contingent, and if he is contingent, he is in need of a mukhassis, yani the one who brought him into existence. So that will entail that Allah is a creation and not a creator. So that is why it is very dangerous, because at the end of the day, na'udzubillah min dhalik, indirectly you are saying any that Allah yani is not any a creator, but he is a creation. So this is any the thing any that will nullify iman. So now any he mentioned wahtaj al-mukhalif. The mukhalif, yani those any who says that Allah is a body, Allah is made of parts, and Allah is bounded by space and is in a place. How come any they come to this conclusion? So here Al-Imam Taftazani, yani he said that the reason why they come into this conclusion bin nusus zahirati fil jihati wal jismiyati was surati wal jawarih. Why do people fall into anthropomorphism? It's quite a long one, yeah? In English, in Arabic, and we call tajsim. Why do people fall into tajsim, this anthropomorphism? How do people fall into thinking that Allah is a body, or Allah take up space and in a place? What is the reason? Al-Imam Taftazani now is telling us that the reason is because when they look at the literal verses of the Quran and the Sunnah, al-nuşus here refers to the Quran and the Sunnah, where literally the verses speaks about direction, or a body, or a figure, or a body part. So what does it mean? So for example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned a'amintum man fis sama. A'amintum man fis sama. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani mentioned a'amintum, yani do you look and do you believe and do you feel man fis sama, that the one whose power yani is in the heavens. And it is how we see, because here we have ismul mawsul. So whenever yani you have any ismul mawsul, there is an a'id. So the a'id is a'amintum man fis sama qudratuhu. But if a person takes the verse literally, he will say that Allah is in sama, that Allah is in the sky. And if a person take this verse literally, just like for example the verse ar-Rahman ala al-arsh istawa. So if a person takes the literal meaning, and he takes the literal meaning of istawa, the literal meaning of istawa is istakarra, yani to be fixed at a particular place, to be fixed at a particular place. So when a person takes the meaning literally, so he will come to the conclusion that Allah is on the arash, that Allah rests on the arash. why do people have any misunderstanding? Because they take the meaning literally. They take the meaning, the Arabic language, when you take out the word istawa from the context, then the meaning is istakara, that it is in a place. It rests in a place. So when the word is mentioned in this context, Ar-Rahman Ar-Shistawa, when it is speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually we cannot be taking the meaning of istakara, because once we do that, then we fell into the impossibilities. We fell into ascribing the impossibilities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is bounded by place. Tamam? So the mujassimah, they fell into this because they take the meaning literally. They take the meaning literally. So that is why when we look at these verses, that this meaning has to be interpreted in accordance to the divineness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to remove all forms of impossibilities, and we have to give an interpretation that suits his majesty, that suits his attributes, his divine attributes. So here Al-Imam Taftazani is saying, وَاحْتَجَّ الْمُخَالِفُ بِالنُّصُوصِ الظَّاهِرَةِ, that they use the literal meanings of the verses of the Quran and the Sunnah, where outwardly as though it speaks about jihah, the direction. It speaks about any direction. We have for example the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pertaining to the narration fi sama. Outwardly it speaks about as-sama as a direction, but in reality the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not speaking about direction to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the word sama has another meaning, that is sama yasmu sumuwan. That we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fi sama, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fi sama. Sama here refers to his majesty, that Allah is above everything in his majesty, in his greatness. So this is the meaning of as-sama. So why do people ascribe direction to Allah by saying that Allah is above? We have the verse in the Quran, Allah mentioned fawqa ibadihi. Literally it means that Allah is fawqa ibadihi, but the meaning of fawqa ibadihi is not that Allah is literally on top of his servants, but the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompass the servants. Allah is all powerful, is all willing, everything is within the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The servants do not possess any power. So literal verses, when they are misinterpreted, this is the thing that people fell into tajsim. Like nowadays, for example, people read translations of the Quran. People read translation of the Quran, translation of the Sunnah. So for example, they come across the word Ar-Rahman Ar-Shistawa, they take the literal meanings, then they come to the conclusion that it is compulsory for us as a Muslim to believe that Allah is on top of the Arash, that Allah is in the direction, that He is in the sky. This is the thing we find some people are speaking about. So where is the mistake? Where is the mistake? The mistake is again taking the literal meanings of these ambiguous verses. So these ambiguous verses, it has to be interpreted. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Ali Imran that those who are fi qalbihi zayrun fayattabi'una ma tashabaha min. One of the characteristics of people who are deviant is that they go to the ambiguous verses, and they take the literal meanings of these ambiguous verses, and they use these meanings over the muhkam, over verses that are not ambiguous. So they fell into tajsim, they fell into ascribing all these impossibilities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Al-Imam Taftazani is saying, this is the problem. وَاحْتَجَّ الْمُخَالِفُ. Al-Mukhalif here goes back to the mujassimah and the mushabbiha. Because we Ahlul Sunnah, we say that Allah it cannot be binded by space, Allah cannot be binded by time, Allah cannot be binded by space, Allah is not a body, Allah does not make up of parts, because all this we mentioned all these impossibilities will lead to what? Will lead to the conclusion that Allah is a contingent being, that Allah is in need of a mukhassis, all these things that He mentioned before this. So by taking the literal meaning, he said fil jihati wal jismiyah. For example, we have the verse in the Quran Allah mentioned yadullahi fawqa aydihim. Yadullah fawqa aydihim. And if a person takes the meaning of yad literally, he says that Allah has a hand. But this the word any the verse in the Quran is not speaking any of a body part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na'udzubillah min dhalik. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking any about his assistance any to the mu'minin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking any about his protection any to the believers. Al-Imam Fakhruddin Ar-Razi ini, for example, when he speaks about yadullah fawqa aydihim, he say wa nusratullah a'zamu min nusratihim. Yani he interpret any the verse yadullah as nusratullah, that the help any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because any the word any yad also can in the Arabic language, it can any make bring any the meaning of help, because when we help any people, normally any we help any people any with our hands, so it is a metaphorical, it carries any a metaphorical any meaning. But if a person takes any the literal meaning and understood any yad any as the body part, then he fell into tajsim, and this is any where he mentioned wal jismiyah was surah wal jawarih, that a person fell any into thinking that Allah yani has a body part, that is a hand as a body part, or Allah yani has eyes as a body part. In other verses and we have what you call it al-ain. Those yani who takes any the literal meaning, they come any to the conclusion any that Allah yani is made up of parts, although any they say that but we do not know how the hands of Allah yani look like. But the fact that they believe that Allah is made up of parts, that Allah is made up any of parts, then this is what you call it the impossibility. This is any the impossibility to believe any that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is made up of parts and binded any by space and secluded any in a place that is any on top any of the arash. So the mujassimah, what do they believe? They believe any that God any, not any God any is a body, but God is inside the sky, that he is any in the sky, that he is on top any of the arash, and he take up space, and he is carried by the angels. So all these things, any all these tanaqudat, and we say, all this any muralatat, and it brings any about all these contradictions in belief, and it brings any a person any into thinking any that God any is a body, that God any rests any on the throne, that God is inside any the sky, that God any has hands any and leg as body parts, and so on and so forth. So we clearly any we can see any the batil any of this ideology. So that is why it is important today any to understand any these realities, and not so that any we do not fall any into this into this false any ideologies any that can bring any a person any towards na'udzubillah min zalik kufr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he mentioned by taking the nusus zahira fil jihati wal jismiyati wal surati wal jawarih, because there are certain ambiguous verses. Outwardly you think that if you take the literal meaning, it speaks any about jihah, it speaks about jism, it speaks about surah, jawarih. Surah any meaning figure, jawarih any body parts. Bi anna kulla mawjudin fardan labudda an yakuna ahaduhuma muttasilan bil akhar mumassan lahu aw munfasilan anhu. So when they ascribe any body to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and place to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so now what they are doing any basically is they are saying any that Allah yani muttasilan bil akhar, that there is some connection any Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala na'udzubillah yani with the other any creation, and Allah yani is out any of certain any creation. So Allah yani is described as ittisal and infisal, yani meaning he is with any certain creations and he is out of certain creation. So this is yani the belief any of those any who ascribe body and place any to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mubayyinan fil jihah, meaning Allah they say that Allah yani is binded any by a direction. Wallahu ta'ala laisa halan wala mahallan lil alam, although any they say that Allah yani does not any rest any on the universe, nor the universe any rest any on Allah. Fayakunu mubayyanan lil alam fi jihatin fayatahayyazu. So they say that since any that Allah yani is ascribed with ittisal and infisal, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is binded by direction, fayatahayyas. Any imagine any this is any again the mujassimah, they say that Allah take up space, fayatahayyas, and he is tahayyus. Fayakunu jisman, then Allah yani is a body, aw juz'a jisman, or part of a body, musawwaran, yani that has any surah, any figure, mutanahiyan, that has boundaries. Na'udzubillah min zalik. So let us any look at what Al-Imam Taftazani mentioned. He said wal jawab anhu, he said to answer yani this what has been said, anna dhalika wahmun mahad, all these things any are wahm, yani these are not realities, but these are just assumptions any of some people any who has misunderstandings due to the fact that, as what he mentioned, that they take the literal meanings of zawahirun nusus, the literal meanings of the sacred text of the Quran and the Sunnah. وَحَكَمَ عَلَى غَيْرِ الْمَحْسُوس بِأَحْكَامِ الْمَحْسُوس. Another issue, Imam Taftazani says that their imagination of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that can be felt. This is the problem. This is the problem. They believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is similar to the mahsus. What is the meaning of mahsus? Mahsus is something that can be felt. Something that can be felt. So the fact that at the back end of their minds they have this understanding that Allah is like the things that we can that are in existence, similar to the things that we touch and that we feel. So the things around us, all of these are jism, correct or not? When you look around you, human beings, when you look at all these things around us, we find that we are surrounded by bodies, we are surrounded by places and spaces. So this person, he cannot imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is different to what he observed by his eyes, because everything that he sees things that take up space. So he cannot imagine that Allah exists not in any place, that Allah does not exist in a place. He cannot imagine that. Because why? Because he is making similar Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the mahsus, as the things that he sees around it. So this is this is the second big issue that they are facing. So number one, is because of the misinterpretation of the literal meanings of the Quran and the Sunnah. Until today, you find people, for example, speaking about the ambiguous verses and saying that Allah is a body, that Allah is in the sky, that Allah is on top of the arash, and so on and so forth, because of their misinterpretation of the Quran, of the misunderstanding of the Quran and also the Sunnah. For example, we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that speaks about that hadith of nuzul, that literally it means that Allah goes down to the first heaven. That Allah goes down to the first heaven. So they literally take the meaning as that Allah moves from the arash to the first heaven. This is metaphorical in reality. This is metaphorical. One of the explanation to this particular hadith is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded angels to go down to the first heaven, not that Allah go down to the first heaven. This is called in Balara, we call it isnadul aqli. Isnadul aqli. When we say, for example, the Prime Minister, for example, a person comes and say that the Prime Minister said, for example, tomorrow is a holiday. The Prime Minister said tomorrow is holiday. This is a messenger. He is conveying the message of the Prime Minister. So we say that the Prime Minister said, although we do not hear the Prime Minister said, but through the messenger, we say the Prime Minister said, but actually it is the messenger said. This is called isnad al-aqli. Isnad al-aqli. Allah commanded angels to go down into the first sky. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascribed this action to himself. And this is metaphorical. The Arabs they usually they speak about this this association. But it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by himself goes down from the arash to the first sky. It is impossible, because doing so, it entails that Allah is a body, that he travels from one place to another place. Not only we say that Allah is binded by space and place, and that place is on the arash. That's what the mujassimah is saying. But it entails that Allah travels from one place to another place. So that is certainly impossible. Na'udzubillah min zalik. It entails that Allah is contingent, and he accepts all these accidents. He accepts this arad of moving from one place to another place. So all these are the impossibilities. So he said, wal adillatul qat'iyya qa'imatun ala tanzihat. He said that the dalil that is qat'iyya, the Quran, we say that the Quran is dalil qat'i, but the dalala is zanni. Verses of the Quran, when it comes to yadullah fawqa aydihim, for example, ar-Rahman al-Shistawa, although all of the Quran is qat'iyya in terms of subut, in terms of the subut of the Quran is qat'iyya, but in terms of the meaning of the verses is zanniya, is open to interpretation. Tamam. So whenever we interpret any verses of the Quran, we have to do a proper interpretation, that suits any the greatness any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot any be interpreting any of the Quran and then we ascribe any Allah any to the makhluk. Because Allah mentioned here, walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Allah ini is not any the same any as his creations. So the author any mentioned that adillatul qat'iyyah qa'imatun ala tanzihat. So dalil any qat'i in the Quran and the Sunnah speaks any about that Allah what you call is free any from all any impossibilities. This is the meaning of tanzihat. So for example, what is the meaning of dalil qat'i here? Let me give you an example of Surah Al-Ikhlas. Surah Al-Ikhlas, dalil qat'iyyah subut and qat'iyyah dalalah. Qat'iyyah dalalah. What is the meaning of qat'iyyah subut, qat'iyyah dalalah? All of the verses in the Quran and we say they are qat'iyyah subut. The meanings in Surah Al-Ikhlas, qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid walam yulad, walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. The meanings are qat'iyyatu dalalah. What is the meaning qat'iyyatu dalalah? When we say qul huwallahu ahad, say Allah is one. This is not open to any interpretation, and it is easy for people to understand. The meaning is clear, and there are no differences amongst the ulama. Meaning, you cannot find any scholar say that Allah is not one. Impossible, because Allah says qul huwallahu ahad. Allah who's samad, Allah stand on his own and is not in need of an entity to subsist. That Allah is not in need of place and space, and is not in need of mukhassis, someone who brought him into existence. All these are impossibilities. Tamam. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid walam yulad. Allah is not begotten and not beget. Walam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, is not any similar to anything. So we have to negate anything that is seen that is ascribed as similarity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is wajib upon us to negate. This is what the author meant. Wal adillatul qat'iyyah qa'imatun ala tanzihat. So dalil qat'i in the Quran and it speaks about tanzih. Tanzih meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the same as other than him. Allah possesses all the perfect attributes. So we cannot be ascribing any shortcomings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he mentioned now how does the scholars when they deal with zawahirun nusus that literally speaks about direction or a body or all these impossibilities. So they said فَيَجِبُ أَن يُفَوَّضَ عِلْمُ النُّصُوصِ إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. So it is wajib upon us that we leave the meaning of those verses to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عَلَى مَا هُوَ دَأْبُ السَّلَفِ, like the pious predecessors, when they come into such verses, they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what it meant. But after they do tanzih, after they say that Allah is not binded by space, Allah is not a body, Allah is not all these impossibilities, then they mention that we leave the meaning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the way of the pious predecessors. The way of the pious predecessors. But when time comes, those who came after them, when the spread of the madhab of the Tajsim, and people began to misinterpret verses of the Quran, the scholars they interpret these verses in accordance to the usul of tafsir, the usul of interpretation of the Quran, that is not contradicting to the divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what he mentioned after that. He said itharan li tariqis al-aslam, and he said the way of the salaf and the pious predecessors is safer. Safer in a sense, they do not give any interpretation. They say Allahu a'lam, aw tu'awwalu bi ta'wilatin sahiha, or it is interpreted with a proper interpretation, ala makhtarahu al-muta'akhkhirin, that those scholars who came later, daf'an li mata'anil jahiliyah, and the reason why they interpret these verses, so that they want to prevent those ignorant ones from misinterpretation of those verses. So whenever they give a meaning, so it becomes clear to the awam that the meaning is such and such. Otherwise the misinterpretation comes, and people will be influenced by those ideologies of the Tajsim. وَجَذْبًا لِطَبَعِ الْقَاسِرِينَ سُلُوكًا لِلسَّبِيلِ الْأَحْكَمِ. So he said that this interpretation is ahkam, it is more it is more grounded in knowledge. When we give any interpretation to things, it is more grounded other than we saying Allahu a'lam. But when we give any interpretation, that is more grounded in terms of knowledge, so that we are able to protect, and we are able to repel false ideologies. So now we go on to where Al-Imam al-Nasafiyyah mentioned wala yushbihuhu shay'un. Al-Imam al-Nasafiyyah mentioned that nothing resembles any Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course this is a qa'idah, this is a principle in aqidah, la yushbihuhu shay', and we get from verses like laisa kamislihi shay'un wa huwa samiul basir, wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Allah is nothing is like Allah. Allah is not the same as other than him. Ay la mumathalah. So he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani la yumathiluhu. Mumathalah meaning comes from the word misl. We say huwa mislu fulanin, he is like a person, you are resembling. So we cannot be resembling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than other than him. So this is a qa'idah. So this also goes back to what we have mentioned before this. We say that other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a body, other than Allah take up space, other than Allah binded by time and so on. So it is wajib upon us to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not binded. Give me a minute. So it is wajib for us to negate. Wajib for us to negate all these impossibilities. So this is where he mentioned ay la yumasiluhu, amma idha urida bil mumathalati al ittihad fil haqiqa fa dhahirun annahu laysa kadhalik, wa amma idha urida bihi kaunu shay'aini bihaythu yasuddu ahaduhuma masad al akhar aw yuslihu kullun lima yasluhu lahu al akhar fali anna shay'an min al mawjudat la yasuddu masaddahu ta'ala fi shay'in min al awsaf. So basically he said that the meaning of la yumathiluhu, meaning everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be used as a resemblance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we speak about his attributes for example. So we say nothing that resembles any of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing resembles any of the entity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nothing that resembles the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what the author is trying to say is that if this is the case, then it is impossible for us to say that there is something else that resemble Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Naam. So he mentioned فَلِأَنَّ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْمَوْجُودَاتِ لَا يَسُدُّ مَسَدَّهُ تَعَالَى فِي شَيْءٍ مِنَ الْأَوْصَافِ. So nothing from the mawjudat, from the things that are in existence, that can be made similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from any of the attributes. فَإِنَّ أَوْصَافَهُ تَعَالَى من العلم والقدرة وغير ذلك أجل وأعلى مما في مخلوقات. So Al-Imam Taftazani he mentioned what about al-ilm wal-qudra, because when we speak about knowledge and power, so we say for example the creation has knowledge. Is this mumathala? This is what he mentioned earlier. Is this are we resembling Allah with the creation when we say that a person has knowledge? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge. Is this mumathala? He said this is not mumathala, because the knowledge of the creation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course we know it is a pre-eternal attribute. So our knowledge comes from him. Our knowledge comes from him. Likewise when it comes to power, we say human beings has the ability to move. So when does this power comes from? It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where he mentioned فَإِنَّ أَوْصَافَهُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ أَجَلُّ وَأَعْلَى. The knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is much greater mimma fil makhluqat, because knowledge of the makhluqat, of the creation, everything comes from Allah. Although we say fulan alimun, fulan qadirun, but we say that his knowledge and from Allah, this power and is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Although we use the same words, but it carries different meanings, and this is not resembling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we understood that everything is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bihaythu la munasabata bainahuma. So there is no munasabah by saying that creations have knowledge, Allah has knowledge, so they are the same. No, the knowledge of the creations are created by Allah, whereas knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a pre-eternal attribute that we cannot imagine on its reality. So inshallah we will stop here, and we will continue in our next lesson. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Taqabbalallahu minkum.